Okay, so continuing from where I left off, so creating a sweep, just like I mentioned the last time, like I explained, is like creating an extrusion along a path. So what Glenn did just now is just create like a quick extrusion. You just create like a dex type thing, and there's like a angle path. So what we're going to do now is to create a sweep along that path. So under the create tab, this is after you've gotten to the model in place option, and then you have like limited two options over there. So click on sweep. So this is what I was looking for. So what you see when you click on sweep, you have two options. You could sketch the path along which you want your sweep to go, or you could pick a path. So in this case, what we are trying to do is to create like some kind of a, let's say a protrusion along this line. So we're going to pick this path. So let's just do that real quick. So you pick a path, and then select that, select that. So that's our path. When you click that, when you pick that path, you can click the green mark to select it. So what you want to do next is, if you've noticed there's a crosshair here, let's try to navigate to that. When you select your path, there's always a crosshair. Here you go. Okay, never use the scroll button again. Okay. So when you come to, every time you pick a path, you notice that the crosshair comes out perpendicular to that line. So in this case, we picked the path that was going this way, and then the crosshair came perpendicular to that path. So what you want to do is align your camera perpendicular to that path, and then sketch the footprint of your sweep. So and that's what we're going to do next. So what you want to do is click on the crosshair, and then the option to edit profile comes out. So you click on the edit profile, and then you have your regular type drawing tools, and you can make it whatever you want it to be. So in this case, we're trying to create like a small protrusion where you could like place stuff on. Imagine this was your desk. You're trying to create something to protrude where you could just, I don't know, drop something like this. So let's sketch the footprint for that to be kind of like an L shape. And we accept that. And when we do that, we could then apply the, go to 3D view to see what we just created. Not quite used to, yeah. So so you can see that it maintained that footprint and created an extrusion along that path. So that's basically what you could do with the sweep tool. And you can use it for other type of objects. Like let's say we're trying to model this object, then you would put something like that. First you create a regular type extrusion with a rectangle, give it a thickness, and then you would create a sweep along this path, and then do the same process. It could be anything you want it to be, really. And okay, so that, anybody has any questions about that? I know I might have gone a bit fast because of high time, but no? Okay. So let's try one more form and then hand it over to Glenn. What we want to try next is the blend form. So the blend form is also another form of it. It's also another type of extrusion. But what it allows you to do is to specify objects with two different type of footprints at the base and at the top. So say you want to model something like, I'm looking for a building example. What comes to mind immediately is an ice cream. You say you want to model something like this, right? And then the bottom is a circle here, and the bottom is a circle. But imagine if this was like a square type top, and then you wanted to model something like that. You can't use an extrusion for that because you can only make, you can't use a regular type extrusion because you can only make one footprint. So you use the blend. So you can specify that I want the top to be a square and I want the bottom to be a circle. and then you extrude it along a certain distance for it to meet. So it's very easy to understand once you view it. So once you come to the create tool, and then you've already clicked on the blend option, the first thing you do is to edit the top, right? So you're editing the top footprint. So you could draw anything you want. So let's say we're trying to do something like this, but with a square at the top. So
you're going to edit the bottom first, and then you click that button to switch to editing the top.
Yes. So what we're doing is editing the bottom first, and then I'm going to click the top once you edit the top. Okay. So yeah, so we did the footprint for that. Let's make it a circle. Right, so that's our footprint for the bottom. And let's do something for the top then. We could also make it any dimension we want. Then you specify that. So we've created the two footprints that we want, and then we could add a depth to it. How high do we want it to be? So let's say we want it to be 3 feet. That would be a very big Coke can. And then accept that. So let's take a look at what we just created in 3D view. Okay. So just like I explained, do you see how we have a bottom section, a bottom that was like circular, and then the top is like rectangular? So you could do anything you want, and while you're here, you could always edit the form of the blend you just created. Yeah, so
It's like conic on two sides and then flat on the other two sides. How could you make it like conic all the way around?
That's really more just like a Revit modeling limitation. It just has a hard time resolving circles to squares.
Okay.
So it did that. We'd almost like, oh, if we took two circles and blended them together, it'd do a better job of that.
yeah, it was
Just a little sloppy about that.
Yeah.
Or even do like a multi-faceted, like 12-sided polygon or something like that.
Could you like sweep it from there and cut out more of the? Could you rotate the shape if you wanted to top rectangle?
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, then you would have to edit the top and then change the footprint.
So we got
That way you
avoid
mean
it.
like rotate it and make it something else?
I'm wondering if you could just rotate the top so that the whole thing happens.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you could do that. Could rotate that.
Not 90. 45. Yeah,
So let's try something else. Ah. You know what? Just gonna draw this again. So let's use a circle instead, so it looks somewhat better. All right. See what that looks like. So it's more of a smooth finish this time. And then you can look at what you just made. And like with other extrusions, you could add the material type to it. You can make it anything you want. Yeah.
how about can you do one that has like a square on the bottom and maybe a square on the top that's rotated 45 degrees? Kind of a nice twisty tower.
Okay. Sure, you could do that.
Don't say that. You injure me.
Okay, so the same process again. You create a blend, right? And then you have the option. So we're starting with the bottom as the last time. So Glenn, you say you want the square at the bottom?
You're a square or a rectangle. Something where we'll see a nice twisty thing going on. Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. And then we click the edit top to edit top footprint.
How about selecting all that and give it a nice rotate?
Do that 45. Okay, so look at that in 3D.
Stretch it on up. Make it a tall tower.
Yeah, so we have a odd shape going on there. Yeah, specify the material type we want to it, and yeah.
Can
So
you rotate now more, like 360, just to get more, like leaps?
can you rotate?
Will it come on the same place, or will it make like 2 turns? If you do now 360. Just a question
Good
for
question.
place for line.
If you do a 360, it's going to be the same.
We'll try.
It's going to come to the same place.
It's going to come to the same place, so it'll be the same thing.
Do
Wait,
it
what
with
is
their
it?
line.
Do 330.
I think you'll get to this point where we're going to get confused about which you want to join. So maybe to do 360, we could do like 2 180s and then stack them on top of each other.
Oh,
It's some, I suspect we'll have to do something like that. We'll play with it, but it's eventually we get confused about which corner wants to join to which corner.
Yeah.
Although there's even a way we can control that and tell it.
Can you do like 3 sections, so a base, a middle, and a top? So like,
Yeah, so can you-
because that's the way you can make it turn twice. Where you do another, so you do edit top and then make another small square in between that top. Would that work?
Is there an option? I don't know about that.
There actually is. I'll take over now.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, it's a good question. First, I want to thank Lottie for like.
you.
It's hard. If you ever really want to get flustered, come up front and like try and show this, especially when I set you up with a bad computer. So no, you did a great job. Thank you, Lottie.
No problem.
We'll pop this in here. Because you're onto a really good question, so I want to like get it out there. And that, there's this notion of blending and just making all these forms, and we were looking at it in terms of doing little things, pieces of furniture and stuff like that. You might recognize that the same kind of basic technique a lot of architects are using now to create buildings. Like you look at a lot of like the Freedom Tower. You look at almost Calatrava's twisting torso. There's all these buildings that are these big twisty things, and you really want a lot of control in terms of being able to do these things. So in terms of editing things just as a mass here, for a blend is defined as having 2 different pieces to it. And even these swept blends, it's only 2 different ones. But I'll show you a trick that actually gets you one step further, because the same general principle applies. We can really take any number of profiles, like those rings which are defining the form, and a path, and join them all together. Okay, so within this modeling in place, this is limited to just 2. And so single profile, second profile, bring them together. Okay, if you want to get even further, let's just go ahead and close this up. We'll finish this one out, and that one looks good, and give you an even more general set for doing this. So let's show that back to 3D, because I liked it that way. There is this notion of ultimately creating something which we call a mass. And a mass can really have, almost any arbitrary shape. And I'll talk about it in a small scale, but you could also be thinking as being 100 stories tall. It's the same sort of general principle. And really what we're going to be is looking at how you extrude things, or how you blend things over even greater distances, or even with more flexibility. So let me show you how that basically works. The massing tool is in a slightly different place. It's over there under massing and site. And if we want to create an in-place mass, which is going to sound an awful lot like an in-place component, okay, we're going to do something very similar. I'm going to say in-place mass. It's going to warn me, masses are kind of an interesting thing. They don't really have a physical meaning. They're just almost forms that material stretches around. The mass is really like just a big construction form. Okay. So it's going to warn me that, hey, by default, I don't usually show you masses because I only show you the real form, the real objects. But I'll turn that on so you can sort of see that. And we want to do that because we're going to edit one now. Okay. This is going to look amazingly similar to where we just were. Okay, we have all sorts of different drawing tools here. I'm going to go through and create some basic forms. Okay, I'm going to go through and, right now I'm down on level 1. I can tell I'm on level 1 because it says level 1, it's kind of hanging around. It shows me that's what the work plane is right now. I'm going to draw some sort of shape down on level 1. Let me just rotate that at the top so you can sort of see it nicely. Okay. I now want to go through and draw another profile. Okay, and as Lottie was doing, we called it the top profile. In this, there's no bottom or top. It's just any number of profiles that we're going to put together. And we'll say that, okay, let's take a look at this. I'm going to draw another one here. I need to put it somewhere. So we have to go through and do something sort of to indicate where we're drawing, and that's something called the work plane. The work plane is really just something that you use to draw on, and currently it's set to level 1. We'd like to have another work plane that's a little bit higher, and Lottie showed you how to use a reference plane to do something like that. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to switch over to one of my elevation views, and I'm going to set up a couple of reference planes. Actually, can I draw them in this view? No. Well, I think any plane can be the work plane. Reference planes are a type of named surface that you can make the work plane. But the surface of a wall could also be the work plane. Okay, does that make sense? Odd. Okay, so I'm going to draw a couple of planes in here. I'm going to draw a plane over here. I'm going to draw a plane up here, just so I have a couple of different planes to work with. And this is going to be, I'm just going to call this by name, the middle of the blend. And I'll call this guy over here the top of the blend. Okay, and again, what am I doing? I'm just giving myself surfaces to draw on. I'm looking at them from the side, so they look like just wafer-thin slices. But if I rotate it up again, we'll be fine. So I'm looking at it from the top again. I'm going to say, let's set the work plane to be the middle. So now when I'm drawing, I'm at that elevation that's a little bit higher. So for the second one, I'll draw some other kind of squarish thing. I'm not seeing it right now because it's actually above my head. I'm at level 1, 4 feet up. I drew that plane much higher, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. It's going to warn me it's not visible. That's okay. Maybe I'll switch to the 3D view because the 3D view is infinite, so it can see higher. Okay, so great. That's level 2. Let's go ahead and draw a third one. I'll set the work plane. Actually, I could either set it this way or I can just choose the work plane there, top of blend. And I'll do some other big thing like that. So now I got these 3 hoops kind of hanging around. They're all square right now. They don't have to be square. Okay, just kind of floating in space. So if I want to go through and actually join those 3 things and blend them all together, I can choose 1, 2, and 3. And then I should say I would like to create a form from them. Okay, it'll really make any arbitrary shape. So if you're used to working in a tool like Rhino, or there's a lot of different kind of CAD software tools that let you do this sort of thing. This is something called a Loft, where you can combine any sort of number of arbitrary shapes together and make a form out of them. But it's really a very powerful thing to do. So I can create something like that. I can take this form that I've created and, let me see if I can edit the whole thing. Let me go through and say I want to see how it's defined. Those are the edges that define it. I can do things like push and pull and stretch and do all sorts of groovy things. Up here at the top, like I'll even go through and do something like I'll just take that point and push and pull it out, and I'm sort of stretching things around. Yeah, but this is just kind of an arbitrary way of going through and creating forms. So the answer is, it's a long-winded answer to the question, can you make it out of more than one? And you can. And there's sort of a whole special way of doing that. And this is really how a lot of the very interesting, organically shaped buildings that have these really interesting forms are created. It's just they go through and blend things like this together. So we can do that with things like, oh, just like those squarish shapes, but you can really do that with almost anything. For example, I'll do another mass in here. And I could do that with, oh, let's do this. On level 1, I'll draw an ellipse. And then also on level 2, I could draw some ellipse in a different shape. So same basic operation. Actually, I'm already in 3D. I can get those two different shapes. I can create a form out of those. It's a little squishy right now. Let me pull that up. Okay, so you really just have, almost infinite control. So this whole thing of basically sketching these different shapes and either extruding the shape or blending the shape is always available to you. Like in extrusion, the first form that we showed you is also available here. You can go ahead and say you want to extrude something. If I just take a shape, and if I give a single shape, a single profile, and nothing else, and I say create a form out of that, it'll say, okay, you have a choice. Do you want it to be an extrusion or do you want it to be a revolve? It could really be either one of those. I'll make it extrusion. And it's just the same way the extrusion tool works. It's really always choosing a profile, then just sort of stretching it up. Okay, does that sort of make sense? Yes?
Could you show us now how to save these forms as family and then import them in another project?
A very good question. A very good question. Okay, because the big point about in-place things, and there's a lot of things we can do with in-place, is that they're in that one project, they're in that one family, or that one, you can't really transfer them around. So you want the ability to kind of bring them around to other things. Okay, so let's see if we can make that work. I don't think I'm going to be able to do what I want to do here. No, so what I'm going to do is actually show you how you do it kind of the more general way. Let me answer the question the long way, but it'll get to the answer you want. And it really is, it's kind of the point of really at a high level what we want to do with today's lesson in terms of getting you going onto the next step in your modeling. So let me open up the slides and show these for a second. Okay, and so there's this basic stuff, in-place tools. You've been looking at the stuff. There's some other things like sweeps, swept blends. We'll leave those kind of hanging for right now because we can go back and kind of practice those. But what we want to start thinking about is really, as opposed to just making in-place components, making families that are shareable and we can transfer them between lots of different projects. So, and the reason we want to do that is that if we make them available in any project and they're repeatable, reusable, and resizable, all those good things, you get a lot of mileage out of them. So for a little bit of work, you get a lot to do. And the basic workflow is so similar. We're going to get to this point where it's really just exactly the same as creating an in-place thing. It's creating a solid or a void, extruding it, blending it, revolving it, or sweeping it. It's really the same at that level. The difference is really just at the front part. Okay, so as opposed to creating an in-place component, which is locked into that one project, you open something called a family template, which opens a shell where you can do that same operation. Okay, but by putting it in this external shell, then you can go ahead and copy it into other projects. So let's kind of show you what I mean. So it all starts with this notion of really just saying that you want to create a new family and choosing a template. So in terms of what you need to, well, leave it out there. It all starts with the notion of choosing the right template. The template is actually sort of a really important thing to think about because every template's associated with a certain category of objects, and you really want to have the right template selected so that you have visibility and graphics control, over like what type of object it thinks it is. It also says a little bit about how the object is hosted. Okay, and that's this whole notion of, is it a freestanding object, like a piece of furniture I can just drop into the room, or is it a hosted object? For example, wall or windows and doors are hosted objects. You can't just put a window in the middle of the room. It has to be hosted by a wall. You can't just put a door in the room. It has to be hosted by a wall. A lot of lighting fixtures are hosted on ceilings. So these kinds of lights, you can't just put them in the middle of the room. You have to have a ceiling in place and stick it into the ceiling. So that's the notion of hosting. So let's just kind of take a look at what that looks like and really ultimately answer your question. So we'll go back over to Revit, and I've been creating these fantastic little pieces that are hanging around here. I like them very much, but I want to make them more general. And here's what I got to do. I'm going to go into the Revit menu and say New, but as opposed to Project, I'm instead going to choose the second choice, Family. Okay. And in terms of a family, there's all these different choices. There's templates. Okay. And what's the difference between most of these templates? For the most part, these templates are just different family categories. You can kind of change things around a little bit later. There's a few that are different. There's electrical equipment, electrical fixture ceiling, electrical fixture wall based. That's a hosted something that'll be a light fixture stuck to a wall or stuck to a ceiling. Let's go for just furniture. There's generic, whether it's ceiling based or based on sticking to the floor or onto the face of something. Let me just go for a piece of furniture as a starting point. Okay, this will be a freestanding piece as opposed to a hosted one. I'll show you the difference. We'll say okay to that. So far we don't have a whole lot of anything. We just have really 2 reference planes, okay, and we're ready to start drawing some mass. Okay. So in terms of drawing, if you look up in the tab, in the ribbon, you'll see that, hey, that looks kind of familiar up there. I've seen things like this before in terms of extrusions, blends, sweeping, all those things. So if I want to create a piece of furniture at a really high level, and just have some sort of reusable piece that looks like this, I'm going to make a very dumb family to start out with. Dumb in the sense that it doesn't have any smarts built into it. So it's this rectangular block that's kind of hanging around here. It's 3 feet tall. I'll finish it. Looks something like this. Not too interesting, but it works. Okay, I like to put a void in it or something like that. Create. I just feel it looks so dumb right now. I have to give it something. Okay. It has some form that might be interesting now. Not very interesting. I have this thing, it's hanging around. I say, great, I have a family now. I've created my very first family. I'm going to say save it away. I'll put it out there in it is RFA family. We can share it. I can give it to you. We can put it on a file server. I can mail it to you. Yes?
How do you load materials?
Well, let's talk about that in a minute. Save the dumb block. If I want to put this now into my project, I'm going to say load into project. And you'll see it actually is hanging at a very small scale right here. Pop it around. It's so tiny compared to the other ones. It's that little piece right there. But that is a family piece. At this point, I can duplicate that family. I can rotate it. I can start creating families in any sort of way. Okay. Your question about this form that you want to put into multiple projects, it's just really another type of family. We're going to say new family. What you're interested in is something called a, actually, I'm going to take that back. New conceptual mass, okay, a mass that has an arbitrary shape, like we created in the mass editor. For that, we have to, it's a special type of family. It's called a conceptual mass, but it's going to look the same. Say it's the mass piece. Again, we're going to choose some things like this. I'll go up to, I need to put another level in so I can have another level to work with. Others. Okay, I'll go back to 3D. I will create this one up on the other level. Okay, so far this looks very similar. I'll control click those, say create a form. It did that. I'll save that away. Let's gonna call it my mass family. Okay, let's load that into our project. So we'll go dropping it in here. It's actually big, we can't see it right now. I'm sorry we didn't get to the answer. We'll continue with the materials. Okay, no worries. That's the mass family kind of hanging around there. So the idea is whenever we want to make things reusable, we put them in a template, and then they become something that we can pull from the library.
I wanted to, during assigning group, I wanted to copy your kitchen from the course you gave us.
Yes.
And adjust my kitchen.
Oh, yes.
It was right on time, but I couldn't do it because it was made in place family. So it is okay for the project when I open it, but there are no ways safe to
Sure.
work inside my project.
No, I understand. It's actually kind of tricky in terms of trying to take an in-place thing and convert it after the fact. It is, let me see if I can kind of even do it with one of them. I think there may be a way to do it now. I haven't played with it much, but we'll see if we can. For example, there's some in-place piece that we created back over here. Let me get rid of these for a second. Like, for example, here's Laddie's little in-place piece down there. Let me see if I can do it in there. Edit family, no, it's not there. Here's his thing, like furniture one, there's my furniture, that's it.
Where is that safe to computer? I just wanted to.
Yeah, I think that we can't really get it out again the way we want to. You know, here it is. There is the furniture one. We have it there, but it's actually just stored in the project itself.
So basically, we can't copy families from project to project.
Oh, you can't copy an in-place family. In-place family, and that's the real limitation between doing that. Let me do this just to sort of give you a sense of where we're going to go with this, though, and then we'll all do this together next time because it's relative to the assignment. And I was talking to Raj at the break there. We're going to go ahead and relative to sort of where we got today, you know, push back the assignment deadline like till the following Tuesday, right? Something like that. So we'll give you some break there, but let me show you where we're going to go with this in terms of these families and where they start getting smart and where it starts to be so important. So you can start thinking about this. So the idea is as follows. You want to go through and create some sort of families. And again, I'll say, oh, I'm going to create some sort of furniture family, or it could be a generic object, doesn't really matter. And you start out with just this very blank slate. It's two reference planes. These are a center line left to right and a center line right to left. And what I would like to do is be able to create, oh, something that will resize itself. For example, if I wanted to make a table or something like that, I'd like to be able to have a table that is so long, it is so wide, it's so high off the ground. I'd like to sort of be able to kind of, you know, have a family that can control itself with parameters the same way that you've been doing things with the families that you've been looking at. Okay, so where we're going to go with this is as follows. We're going to basically talk about doing something like this, where we can set up, well, let me find them in here. some reference planes. Oops. I should draw things properly. Around an object. Then I can create something like an extrusion. And give that some sort of distance. But what I would like to be able to do is as follows. I'd love to be able to have this thing be able to resize itself, okay, based on some numbers that I type in, as opposed to have to stretch it in there. So how I can do that is as follows. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add some dimensions to the reference planes. Now those dimensions are kind of okay the way they are, but I don't just want that dimension 7'2". I'd actually like that to be the length of the table, where I could type in some length of the table and put that in there instead. And how we do that is we actually add something called adding a parameter to it. So I can just call this the table length. Okay, which is currently 7'2", but I can switch it. Same thing over here. I'm going to take that, I'm going to call it the table width. Okay, but again, I want to be able to switch it. Okay, so you with me so far in terms of trying to set up some dimensions? Okay, I got these dimensions, they're going to push the green lines around. Okay, what I'd love to do is actually go one step further and have those green line, or those dimensions push the edges of the real surface around. So how I do that is, with my all-purpose align tool, say I want to take the green line and basically align that edge to it and lock it. Align this edge and lock it. Lock them all in there. Beautiful. So now I have something where the four sides of the box are all locked to those dimensions. Now, why is that useful to you? It's because you can actually set up your own family types where we change those parameters. So if you want a table that's only 1 foot wide, it'll resize it. If you want something that's 3 feet long, it'll resize it. If you want something that's 100 feet long, it'll resize it. And that may not look so exciting in 2D, but in the same sense, you can start resizing and pushing and pulling things very, very easily. And this really starts to be the basis of, like, some very cool capabilities. All those parts that you're downloading from the library and you're taking a look at are defined this way, where we have some basic extrusions or some blends, we have some dimensions that are pushing and pulling to resize the objects, and they're just responding to the numbers you put in there. So for example, let me show you this, because we can load that into our project and use it. A good way to start thinking about components is actually to open up a family. And if we go out there and just grab something that you've pulled into your house, or grab something from the Revit library, but let's just take a look at how some of them are defined. That's probably a little complicated. I'm going to go for something a little simpler. How about that little Corbusier chair? That's kind of a nice one. Okay, so this is that part. And you might wonder about that and how is it defined and all that good stuff. Let's see if we can sort of figure it out. You can choose any piece, like that's a piece, that little cushion on the side. Actually, let me do this one on the bottom first. There's that cushion on the bottom. If you say that I want to go through and oh, it's interesting. This thing's made up of several pieces that are all coming together. I should choose an easier example. That's the cushion on the bottom. I can edit its sweep. That's actually just the curve on it. Oh, let me choose a simpler object. This object, I just happen to choose an arbitrarily hard object. That's not a very good one to start with, because that'll just confuse the matter. Let's go back in there again. Let's go something like that desk. That desk is a nice simple one. Storage, beds, seating, tables. Okay, here's the desk. Let's think of it. Can you guess how this desk is made? So that's that tabletop, how do you think that's made? Yeah, that's just an extrusion from 2'4" to 2'6". You can see the profile of the extrusion right there. How about the body of the desk there? Yeah, it's telling us it's an extrusion. We can edit it. They made that just as kind of a U-shaped body of the desk. That may not have been the best way. It's kind of a cheat because it doesn't really have holes on the inside. It's going to look good from the outside, but it's kind of a cheat. Okay. Here's a good one for you. How about those little legs down at the bottom? Can you see those little legs? Very good. That's got to be a blend because it's got like basically different profile at the top and the bottom. How about those drawer faces? Yeah. I'm betting those are an extrusion, but notice this. They're not extruded from the ground up. They're extruded from the face back. And so how does this all work? In terms of why does that desk resize and do what it's supposed to do? If we go on back to the definition, you'll see it actually has these reference planes too. The depth is 2'6", the width is 5 feet. So what happens is the body reshapes as it needs to. These little corners are aligned to the edges of those green lines. That's why they pull out where they need to be. You know, what's this 8 inches? This 8 inches is, I think, to the space of wherever the drawer front is. So the drawer fronts are always 8 inches from the corner. So great. Using this sort of algorithm, or this basically way of setting it up, we can go through and choose different sizes of desks. As we do, everything just sort of stretches and does what it needs to kind of work very nicely. So that's where we're going to go with this, and that's where you're going to go with the assignment. We'll learn how to put some planes in so that we can have objects that stretch and do what they want to. We're going to learn how to add parameters to do things like change the material of a property and actually be very smart. So for example, if the table is 6 feet long, maybe it only has 4 legs. But if the table is 9 feet long, it'll actually have 6 legs. Or if it's 20 feet long, it'll have 8 legs. So you can build in all these formulas that automatically array different things and add elements as necessary when things get bigger. So we'll learn how to create very smart objects, and that's ultimately what you're going to be doing for the next assignment. Okay, so for the assignment, the way they explained it, you're basically going to start thinking about things that you want to model, some little furniture object or something in your world that you want to model. So start thinking ahead to really what it might be and what sort of shapes you might need to define it. And then when we get back together on Tuesday, we'll talk about how to actually build it and build the smarts in so that it actually does what you want to stretch. Okay? Beauty, let's go ahead and quit for today.